If you're considering full-time travel, my vote would be to say yes. And here's why. I'm a huge introvert and actually a pretty conservative person by nature. And yet for 35 years, I carried this dream and this plan around with me that said, I'm going to be a full-time traveler. I'm going to see the rest of the world and meet people and see how they do things. But somehow the stars and moon just didn't quite seem to align. Until one day they did. I was unhappy at work. I found myself in the same routine day after day. And I have to say, I eventually grew tired of trying to manage my stuff. The stuff of life, mostly the physical stuff, but also the mental stuff. It was then that the decision became clear. Yes, I was going to do this. Yes, I was going to open up that part of my mind and work towards it. Yes, I was going to be a full-time traveler. And I decided if the whole thing crashes and burns, at least I did it. At least I took the chance on myself. And as morbid as it may sound, at least I can go to my deathbed knowing I did it. I tried. I gave it a shot, and this is what I learned. This is what happened. Let me tell you, it wasn't fast. It took me and Dean about a year to downsize life, to say our goodbyes, to get our finances and our paperwork in order. And I can also very honestly say it was not easy. There were more than a few times that I shed some tears, let me tell you. But I can also very honestly and confidently tell you it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. Now, here's the catch. I'm still an introvert. That doesn't just go away because you decide to change locations, pull a geographic if you want to call it that. My whole life I had worried about bothering people, or what am I going to do? How am I going to escape if this gets too people-y? That doesn't just disappear because you're traveling. It's a real thing. But here's the reward. When you tell your little introvert side to please sit quietly and let's just take a chance and see what happens, the reward is immense. People open their lives and their living rooms to you, and you get memories you wouldn't trade for anything. Without those yeses, we would have missed so many experiences that can't be duplicated and you can't find on a tour. We take these memories with us and turn them over every now and then. We have little inside jokes, and it just has enriched our lives in ways that I couldn't have imagined before. And if you hear a little background noise, I guess we decided to say yes to living in an apartment where there's construction all the time. It happens, it's okay. In Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, we kept bumping into this nice young man outside of our apartment named Nejmin. He was warm and smart and very welcoming. He took us on little tours throughout Old Town Sarajevo and into little nooks and crannies and corners of the city that we would not have seen otherwise. We spent hours laughing and talking about how the world works and the difference between his age and our age, and it was just a wonderful experience. On top of that, he introduced Dean to Bosnian coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, unfortunately, for this experience, and ever since then, all other coffee gets measured up against that moment. He shared his mother's preserves with us, and when it was time for us to leave, he drove us to the bus station. That wasn't transactional. That wasn't a tour. That was just building friendship and spending time with a new friend. In Sweden, we met our next door neighbor, Elizabeth, and her husband, Ted. Elizabeth is the most free-spirited, free person I've ever met in my life, and I think of her often when I get uptight. I just think about how would Elizabeth handle this, or what would she do? Right from the very beginning, she immediately invited me into her home to have fika, which is coffee and sweets. She made me a lovely cup of tea and invited me to Gong yoga. And my head was spinning. What in the world is Gong yoga? And is this a good idea? And then that little voice said, say yes, say yes, say yes to this experience. So what that meant was over an hour drive to get there, and we laughed and made so many jokes and talked about language and talked about how we grew up. The time just flew by. I didn't know it was going to be in a barn. So we came rolling up to this property, and I couldn't quite figure out what was going on, and I just kept saying yes and putting one foot in front of the other. And Gong yoga is actually kind of a big deal, a big thing in Sweden. And this was in an unheated barn up in the hayloft, and all the beautiful mats were laid out, and everything was in soft beiges and woolly feelings and beautiful nubby blankets you could cover up with when the gong time became the time. And it was a great experience, much more energetic than the yoga that I'm used to. And the teacher was talking about what was going to happen to you and what you were going to feel when the gong part started. And I didn't know what I thought was going to happen, or if I kind of bought into that. And you know, she was completely right. At first, you're kind of laying there and the gong starts, and it's not like this dong dong thing. It's like a rolling thunder that takes you up and down through all sorts of feelings and states of being. I mean, I'm really not woo-woo, and it was very woo-woo and super zen. The instructor was so kind that she conducted the entire class in English just for me, and what a feeling of being welcomed and embraced into this situation. It was really unforgettable. In Gdansk, Poland, where we are now, we were invited to go sailing across the Bay of Gdansk. That sounded like a lot of fun. We didn't know what to expect, but we said yes. Come to find out, this whole sailing excursion was a mock invasion of Vikings to the other side of the Bay of Gdansk. So there we were on the water, just being silly, enjoying the sun, and making sure we had our little silly Viking hats on. After we invaded the small town across the bay, we were invited, or maybe we conquered them, and we were able to enjoy a Polish barbecue, which consisted of getting handed this hunk of kielbasa, a great big fat sour pickle, some sardines, and you would take your hunk of kielbasa and put it on a metal skewer, and you got to roast it yourself. The locals on that side of the bay had also prepared a little bit more realistic Viking reenactment for us. I'm sure it was very informative, but of course it was all in Polish and I couldn't understand. But they had performances and mock battles, and it was a ball. Then a little bit later, they had live music. And let me tell you, it was so fun to hear "What Shall I Do with the Drunken Sailor?" in Polish. It was just a hoot. You knew what the song was, but of course you didn't know the words. People were dancing and having a great time. And this was all possible because we said yes to an invitation. I think for the rest of our lives, when we think of Poland, we'll think of Viking invasions and sailing. That's a memory that I certainly wouldn't have put together. Early in our full-time travel life adventures, we met a spitfire of a lady and her daughter in Morelia, Mexico. We were chatting and she invited us to the bread throwing parade. Let that sink in a little bit. A bread throwing parade? What does that mean? What is that like? So again, we said yes, not knowing what was going to happen or what it was going to look like. She said, make sure you bring bags. So we did. The bread tossing parade is an invitation from bakers all around the state of Morelia to come together and literally toss bread from their floats out to the crowd. It got chaotic, it was festive, and we sure saw her spunky side. She kept telling me in Spanish to tell Dean to get in there, get in there. And remember that little introvert side I was telling you? We were a little introverted to be too aggressive, and we also didn't know if that was culturally appropriate. So we hung back a little bit, and she just wasn't having it, kept pushing us and yelling, get in there, get in there. And so by the end of the day, that became a little bit of a running joke. And before we parted ways, she said, yeah, I wanted you to have a lot of fun, but more than that, Dean's tall and he has a good reach. And I wanted you to make sure that you got in there and grabbed some bread. We've thought about that so many times and had a really good laugh about it. We're so glad we said yes to a bread tossing parade. And then there was Iceland. You know, the place where there are more sheep than people? Well, we found out a little more about sheep than we knew that we were in for. We were in a very remote part of Iceland and we stumbled across the Sheep Museum, which was a building about the size of a 2-car garage. And during the school year, it was a 1-room schoolhouse. And during the summer when we were there, it was the local sheep museum. Now, we had been kind of traveling around in this little car, doing a lot of camping and eating a lot of food that was, you know, kind of camping food. And as we looked through the displays and read all about the sheep of the area, we kept smelling this wonderful smell. Thought, what is going on? Does somebody live here in the back? And what is that incredible smell? So just about the time we were getting ready to leave, the owner of the museum, who also turned out to be the fabulous cook, said, oh, there are some people here doing some construction work and I've made them a dinner of lamb and other things. Would you like to join us? Oh, that was the fastest yes you could ever imagine. That one, we did not hesitate about saying yes, and we're really glad we did. We were able to enjoy this homemade lamb dinner with the owner and the other people that were there working on the property. We never saw that coming when we walked into that museum. But boy, are we glad we were in the right place at the right time and said yes. Most of these connections are fleeting, and it's pretty likely we'll never see those people again. But for a moment, our worlds overlap. And that's really the beauty and the magic of slow travel and full-time travel. The people who open their doors, their kitchens, and their sailboats to us. They're more than willing to open up to us as people and share their lives with us. And it's all from just saying a simple yes. That would be fabulous. Can't wait. So if you're dreaming of full-time travel, my advice is quite simple. Say yes. You have no idea where that will lead you. That year leading up to actually leaving the country, when I was shedding some tears about what I was going to do with my KitchenAid mixer. If you could have told me that I was going to meet Najmeen and Elizabeth and go sailing and eat a lamb dinner prepared by a local, that would have made the decision a lot easier. But of course, I didn't know that. And that's the beauty of saying yes without knowing exactly how it's going to turn out. It will turn out, and I bet it'll be even better than you could have imagined. Tell me about your best yes while traveling. I love those stories, and I'd love for you to drop it in the comment section so I can live vicariously through your yeses. And if you're enjoying this content, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share this with someone who you know that might be on the fence about taking the leap of full-time travel. I'm so glad you joined us today, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.